can't believe it's already been 5 years since we were going through it. And before the entire world shut down, we were all expecting the highly anticipated matchup between Tony Ferguson and Khabib Nurmagomedov, especially because the first 4 times were canceled December 11th. Khabib had to pull out with an unknown injury. They're supposed to fight in 2015 and 2016. Ferguson had to pull out because of fluid in his lungs. The closest we've ever gotten to this fight was March 2017, but Khabib had to pull out due to weight cutting issues, and we all know April 2018 was one of the craziest fight weeks in UFC history in which Tony had to pull out, and we all thought we were getting the fight we all wanted. However, after UFC 248 and UFC Fight Night in Brazil, where there was no fans, the entire world shut down, all sports shut down, which led to somewhat the cancellation of this pandemic. But what people don't know is in the build-up to Dana was trying to save this card. He was going to go full Jurassic Park and purchase an island to where they can hold fights. And before that, he was trying to find states that would allow them to keep holding this fight card with no fans. And he got his wish. The fight card was saved. However, Khabib decided to jet back to Russia because apparently he thought that there was going to be no fights and that the entire Tony Ferguson fight was off. Here's something suspicious though that I feel like nobody wants to talk about. Nurmagomedov, rest his soul. He built an amazing legacy not only with his son, but Islam Makhachev. He would succumb to the deadly virus in July of 2020. However, the fight card was rescheduled to May 9th. Here's what I think is fishy. You guys clicked this video because I had a theory that Khabib ran from Tony. I'll get into that in a second. I'm not trying to disrespect anybody. I'm not trying to say anything that'll piss somebody off, although I'm myself in every single video and I just piss people off. I have a knack for that, but I'll get to the point. So the fight was supposed to take place on April 18th, 2020. And as I mentioned just a few seconds ago, Khabib went back to Russia. So here's my theory as to how this fight still could have happened. Not that Khabib ran, but the fight still definitely could have happened. It was no secret Dana was trying to save not only this card, but this highly anticipated fight that everybody wanted to see because this was back when Tony was in his prime. The UFC was trying to get this fight moved from anywhere besides Brooklyn. They were trying to have it in California. There were rumors that it was going to be in Florida. So it was still going to happen, but Khabib jetted off to Russia to supposedly be with his family. All right, well, Abdulmanap didn't pass away until July 2020. All right, rest his soul. Like I said, I'm not trying to make anyone mad, but I'm going to put a little blame on the UFC here for a minute because they knew what they were doing. It was no secret. Everybody knew what they were doing. They were trying to be the first sports promotion back into the world of sports when we were going through it. Why didn't they tell Khabib just to hang on a few more weeks and we'll get you a fight? Because we all know he was in camp. And we all know Khabib will take on anybody, anytime, anywhere. He probably had a little tapering off phase. And if they would have just said, wait just a little bit, we're going to get you a fight date. Instead, they just let him go back. And I get it. We were in a time where it was only 2 weeks. We're only supposed to be on lockdown for 2 weeks. And after that, everything should be back to normal. I get that. But why didn't they just communicate with him a little better and say, hang on, just wait a bit? Instead, he went back, and then, of course, you go back to whatever country you're residing in. They're not going to let you out of the country, and rightfully so. We were trying to stop the spread of this virus. Had the UFC just told him to hang on, we still could have got this fight. We didn't have to have Tony Ferguson fight Justin Gaethje. We didn't have to have Khabib come back 5 months after that. We would have just gotten the fight that we've all been waiting for. I don't care what you say. Any hardcore or even casual MMA fan at that point in time would have seen Tony versus Khabib fight in front of no fans on their televisions at home. It would have been probably the most highest selling pay-per-view before Kamaru and Jorge Masvidal fought. It would have been one of the most top 5 easily highest selling pay-per-views in UFC history because we still would have gotten that fight. But in a perfect world, that's probably what would have happened. On paper, we got a better fight card. Khabib out, Justin Gaethje in, facing Tony Ferguson for the interim lightweight championship. Henry Cejudo was supposed to fight Jose Aldo, but never fear, the bantamweight GOAT is here. Dominic Cruz steps in, and that ended in controversy. Francis Ngannou versus Jairzinho had a crazy 20-second KO. Greg Hardy, Jorgen De Castro, Jeremy Stevens, Calvin Kattar, that ended in a highlight reel knockout in favor of Kattar. And then on the prelims, you had Cowboy versus Pettis. It was a great card. Some fights were canceled, but this card signified the end of Tony Ferguson, as he would never win a UFC fight ever again, and Khabib went on to retire after this fight against Gaethje. I'm just saying, when you look at the grand scheme of things, this fight still could have happened, and we would have all gotten finality when it comes to us MMA fans. And had Khabib retired after his father passed away 2 months later, we wouldn't have knocked him for it. Hell, nobody knocked him for it when he retired against Gaethje. But my point being is, he would have retired on such a high note in the MMA community, because we all would have finally gotten the fight we so desperately wanted.